The woman nobody believed in. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed barely 100 pounds soaking wet. In 1968, at the height of the Vietnam War, she was one of only a handful of women serving in naval intelligence, and nearly everyone she worked with thought she was in over her head. The men in her unit called her tiny behind her back. Some called her worse things. During physical training exercises, she struggled to complete obstacle courses that her male colleagues breezed through. When equipment needed to be moved in the intelligence center, others would physically move her aside and say, "Let the men handle this, sweetheart." But Sarah Chen had something that had nothing to do with physical strength. She had a photographic memory, an exceptional talent for pattern recognition, and an unwavering commitment to her work. What she lacked in muscle, she more than made up for in mental capacity and determination. The problem was, nobody was looking at those qualities. They only saw her size. The assignment nobody wanted. In the spring of 1968, Naval Intelligence received a complex assignment. The North Vietnamese were using an elaborate code system to coordinate naval movements in the Gulf of Tonkin. American forces had intercepted hundreds of encrypted messages, but the code was proving nearly impossible to crack. It wasn't like the classic cipher systems that cryptographers were trained to break. It was something different, something that required not just mathematical skill, but creative thinking and intuitive pattern recognition. 3 different intelligence officers had already tried and failed to crack the code. Each had spent weeks analyzing the messages, running them through every known decryption method, consulting with experts at the National Security Agency. Nothing worked. The code remained impenetrable, and every day it stayed unbroken meant American ships were operating with incomplete intelligence about enemy movements. Commander Robert Hayes, the head of the intelligence unit, was frustrated. He needed results, and he needed them fast. During a staff meeting, he slammed his hand on the conference table and said, "I need someone who can think differently, someone who doesn't just follow the standard procedures, someone creative." His executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Mark Stevens, looked around the room at the various intelligence officers. His eyes passed over Sarah, dismissed her, then came back. A slow smile spread across his face, but it wasn't a kind one. "What about Chen?" he said. "She's always talking about her special analytical methods. Why not let her take a crack at it?" The other officers in the room chuckled. Everyone knew Stevens was setting Sarah up to fail. If the code had already defeated 3 experienced officers, there was no way the tiny woman fresh from intelligence school was going to crack it. When she failed, and everyone assumed she would, it would prove what many of them already believed, that women didn't belong in naval intelligence, especially not in combat-related analysis. Commander Hayes studied Sarah for a long moment. She met his gaze steadily, showing no fear or hesitation. Finally, he nodded. "All right, Chen, you've got 2 weeks. Show us what you can do." Working in the shadows. She knew exactly what was happening. She knew this was a setup, a test designed for her to fail. But she also knew something else. She was better at this than anyone gave her credit for. She had graduated top of her class at the Defense Language Institute. She had scored higher on pattern recognition tests than anyone in the program's history. She just needed the chance to prove it. For the next 13 days, Sarah barely left the secure analysis room. She worked 16-hour days, fueled by coffee and determination. She covered the walls with printouts of the intercepted messages, searching for patterns that others had missed. She approached the problem from every angle she could think of. The traditional methods weren't working because this wasn't a traditional code. Sarah realized that the North Vietnamese weren't just encrypting their messages, they were hiding messages within seemingly innocent communications. It was stegography combined with encryption, a double layer of concealment that required recognizing the hidden messages first before you could even begin to decrypt them. But there was something else, something that nagged at the back of her mind. The pattern of the hidden messages reminded her of something, but she couldn't quite place it. She went back through her training materials, through everything she had studied about Vietnamese culture and communication methods. On the 13th day at 3 in the morning, it hit her. The pattern was based on Vietnamese poetry structure, specifically a classical form called Luk Bát, which alternated between 6 and 8 syllable lines. The North Vietnamese cryptographers had built their code around a cultural reference they assumed Americans wouldn't recognize. Once Sarah understood the underlying structure, the code began to unravel. She worked feverishly through the night, decrypting message after message. What emerged was a complete operational plan for a major North Vietnamese naval offensive scheduled to begin in just 5 days. The plan detailed movements of patrol boats, mine placements in key shipping channels, and coordinated attacks on American supply vessels. If executed successfully, it would have been one of the most devastating naval operations of the war. But now, Sarah had the entire blueprint in her hands. The moment of truth. At 0600 hours, Sarah walked into Commander Hayes' office. She hadn't slept in over 30 hours. Her uniform was wrinkled, her eyes were bloodshot, and her hands were shaking from too much caffeine and too little rest. She looked exactly what the skeptics expected, a small woman who was physically exhausted and in over her head. Lieutenant Commander Stevens was already in the office, smirking as Sarah entered. "Well, Chen, ready to admit defeat? It's okay, nobody expected you actually—" Sarah placed a thick folder on the commander's desk. "I broke the code, sir, and we have a serious problem." The smirk vanished from Stevens' face. Commander Hayes opened the folder and began reading. As he turned page after page of decrypted messages in Sarah's analysis, his expression grew increasingly grave. "Chen, are you certain about this? If this intelligence is accurate—" "I'm certain, sir. I've triple-checked the decryption. The North Vietnamese are planning a major naval offensive beginning at 0400 hours on April 17th. That's 5 days from now. These documents detail every aspect of their operation." Hayes grabbed his phone. "Get me Sinpak on secure line, now." Over the next 4 hours, Sarah briefed a series of increasingly senior officers on her findings. Each time, she faced skepticism. Each time, she calmly and methodically walked them through her analysis, showing them exactly how she had broken the code and why she was confident in the intelligence. Admiral Thomas Morrison, commander of the Pacific Fleet, was the hardest sell. He looked at this tiny woman claiming to have cracked a code that had stumped some of the Navy's best cryptographers, and his doubt was written all over his face. "Lieutenant Chen, I'm going to ask you a question and I need you to be completely honest. Is there any possibility you made a mistake? Because if I divert fleet assets based on faulty intelligence, if I put ships and sailors in harm's way based on a misinterpretation, that's on me. So, I need to know, how certain are you?" Sarah looked the Admiral directly in the eye. "Sir, I stake my career on this intelligence. It's accurate. The attack is coming, and if we don't act, we're going to lose ships and lives." The Admiral studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, Lieutenant. I hope you're right, because if you're wrong, both our careers are over." The fleet moves. Based on Sarah's intelligence, the Pacific Fleet began a carefully orchestrated repositioning. Ships that would have been in the target zones were quietly moved. Supply routes were altered. Patrol patterns were changed. Anti-mine countermeasures were deployed in the channels where the intelligence indicated mines would be placed. And most importantly, attack aircraft and fast patrol boats were positioned to intercept the North Vietnamese forces. Sarah wasn't allowed to know the specific military response. That information was far above her clearance level. All she could do was wait and hope she had been right. The night of April 16th was the longest of her life. She sat alone in her quarters, unable to sleep, knowing that within hours they would know whether her analysis had been correct or catastrophically wrong. If she was right, American forces would intercept a major enemy operation. If she was wrong, she would likely face court-martial for causing a massive misallocation of military resources during wartime. At 0430 hours on April 17th, Sarah was awakened by pounding on her door. She opened it to find Commander Hayes standing there with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Come with me, Lieutenant Chen." They walked in silence to the command center. When they entered, the room erupted in applause. Officers who had dismissed her, who had called her tiny, who had assumed she would fail, were now standing and clapping. On the main display screen was a battle map showing the results of the night's operations. The North Vietnamese offensive had unfolded exactly as Sarah's intelligence had predicted. But because American forces were prepared and positioned, it had been a complete failure for the enemy. Multiple patrol boats had been intercepted and destroyed. The mine-laying operation had been disrupted before the mines could be placed. Not a single American vessel had been damaged. It was a tactical victory of significant proportions, all because of one lieutenant's ability to see patterns that others had missed. Admiral Morrison was present via video link. "Lieutenant Chen, your analysis was precise and accurate. Thanks to your work, we achieved a complete tactical victory with 0 casualties. The fleet owes you a debt of gratitude. Well done." Breaking barriers. The success of Sarah's code breaking changed something fundamental in her unit. The jokes stopped. The dismissive comments ended. When she walked into a room, people listened. Her opinion was sought on difficult cases. She was assigned to increasingly important projects. But more importantly, her success changed the conversation about women in naval intelligence. If someone as physically small as Sarah Chen could carry the intellectual weight of critical intelligence work, what other assumptions were the Navy making that needed to be challenged? Sarah was promoted to lieutenant commander and eventually became one of the Navy's leading experts on cryptanalysis and pattern recognition. She trained dozens of intelligence officers, always emphasizing the same lesson: never judge capability by appearance, and never assume the obvious solution is the right one. Years later, when Sarah retired as a captain after 30 years of service, Admiral Morrison, himself now retired, attended her ceremony. During his speech, he told the story of the young lieutenant who had saved the fleet. "I almost didn't believe her," he admitted. "When I saw this tiny woman telling me she'd cracked an impossible code, my first instinct was doubt. But she taught me something important that day. She taught me that strength comes in many forms. Physical strength can move equipment and win boxing matches, but mental strength, analytical brilliance, determination, those things can save lives and win wars." Captain Chen carried a weight that day that was far heavier than any physical burden. She carried the responsibility of being right when everyone expected her to be wrong. She carried the lives of thousands of sailors in her analysis. And she carried the hopes of every woman who would come after her, hoping to prove they belonged in this field. That's a weight most of us will never have to carry. The legacy of being underestimated. Sarah Chen's story is powerful not just because of what she accomplished, but because of what she overcame to accomplish it. She succeeded despite being underestimated, dismissed, and set up to fail. And in doing so, she proved that our judgments about people's capabilities are often based on the wrong criteria. We live in a world that still makes assumptions about people based on how they look, how much they weigh, how tall they are, what gender they are. We see someone's physical appearance and make instant judgments about what they're capable of doing. And in making those judgments, we miss extraordinary talent. How many brilliant minds have been overlooked because they came in unexpected packages? How many problems have gone unsolved because we didn't think to ask the wrong person? How many opportunities have been lost because we were looking for strength in the wrong places? Sarah succeeded because she refused to accept other people's limitations on her. When they said she was too weak, she found a role where her real strengths mattered more. When they set her up to fail, she worked harder and smarter than anyone expected. When they doubted her, she proved them wrong with results they couldn't argue with. But we shouldn't require people to be exceptional just to be given a chance. We shouldn't make people like Sarah fight twice as hard to prove what should be obvious, that capability isn't determined by physical size or gender or any other superficial characteristic. The military has learned this lesson, slowly and sometimes painfully. Today, women serve in every role in the United States Armed Forces, including combat positions that were unthinkable in Sarah's era. They serve not because they got special treatment or lowered standards, but because they proved, over and over again, despite constant doubt, that they could do the job. What can we learn? Sarah Chen's story offers several powerful lessons for all of us, whether we're in the military or not. First, question your assumptions. When you meet someone and make an instant judgment about what they can or cannot do, stop and ask yourself, what am I basing this on? Is it actual evidence or just assumptions based on appearance? Second, give people the opportunity to surprise you. Lieutenant Commander Stevens set Sarah up to fail, expecting her defeat to prove his prejudices correct. Instead, she succeeded and proved him wrong. Imagine if Commander Hayes hadn't given her the chance. The code would still be unbroken, and American sailors would be in grave danger. Third, recognize that strength takes many forms. Physical strength is valuable in many situations, but it's not the only kind of strength that matters. Mental resilience, analytical thinking, creative problem solving, attention to detail, these are all forms of strength that can be just as important as the ability to lift heavy objects. Fourth, support the underestimated. If you're in a position of leadership or influence, pay attention to who's being dismissed or overlooked. Sometimes the person everyone doubts is the person who'll surprise you most. And finally, if you're the one being underestimated, take inspiration from Sarah's example. Don't waste energy trying to prove yourself in areas where you'll always be at a disadvantage. Instead, find the places where your unique strengths matter most. Then work harder than anyone expects. Prove your worth with results and let your success speak for itself. The secret she carried. The title of this story says Sarah carried the secret that saved the fleet. But she actually carried two secrets. The first was the literal secret, the decoded intelligence about the North Vietnamese offensive. That secret saved ships and lives. But the second secret she carried was perhaps more important, the secret that capability doesn't look the way we expect it to, that strength isn't always visible from the outside, that the person you least expect might be the one who saves the day. That second secret is one we all need to carry and remember. In our workplaces, our schools, our communities, everywhere we interact with other people, we need to remember that we don't know what someone is truly capable of until we give them the chance to show us. Sarah Chen weighed 100 pounds, but she carried the weight of the entire fleet's safety. She was physically the smallest person in her unit, but she had the biggest impact. She was constantly underestimated, but she was the one who delivered when it mattered most. The next time you're tempted to judge someone by their appearance, remember Sarah. Remember that the person you dismiss might be carrying something far more important than physical weight. They might be carrying the solution to your unsolved problem, the answer to your difficult question, or the key to your next breakthrough. All they need is for someone to give them the chance to prove it. If Sarah Chen's story inspired you, let's make sure more people hear it. Smash that like button to honor her. Subscribe to this channel for more untold military stories and forgotten heroes. Share, drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you look? Turn on all notifications so you never miss our next story.